home. We are WNST, Towson, Baltimore, AM 1570, Baltimore Positive. We celebrating our 26th year. I've got a crab and an oyster. We're going to be doing 26 oysters in 26 days, beginning on Thursday. We're going to be doing a lot of baseball, a lot of football, a lot of oysters. 5 crab cake tours this month, all of them brought to you by the Maryland Lottery. You'll have the Gold Rush Sevens doublers, as well as the Raven scratch-offs to give away. And, of course, our oyster tour, 26 oysters, 26 ways, 26 days, all around the bay, brought to you by our friends at Liberty Pure Solutions. They keep your well water clean. They can help you with your plumbing. And much like the oysters oxygenating the bay and bringing the crabs to life, they'll make sure that your water is crystal clear, just like it is in my glass right now. This guy has filled my glass with baseball cheer since I was a very young man. I think I read his work at Baseball Digest and a longtime Associated Press. And he decided to wear his Yankees hat, and there's no cheering in the press box, even though I'm not allowed in the press box. Barry Bloom joins us. He is Boomski. He is out in Arizona these days, but spent a long
Hey,
time on
Nestor,
the East
what's
Coast,
going on?
West Coast. What's going on? How are you? Happy
Doing
pennant
good.
race to you. It's a September pennant race in Baltimore. I know it's shocking for you to be here after all these years.
There are pennant races all over the place. It's good.
Well, for the Orioles and the Yankees, and you've decided to wear your Yankee hat and haze me. I think you said F the Orioles before we came on the air. That's fine. Every Yankee fan should feel that way. We're in the way now. It's almost like Elaine Bennis and Jerry Seinfeld, like we're in the way all of a sudden. But I'll say this, the Orioles unbelievably diminished since the last time you and I got together in the spring, just in regard to how many players they've lost, where they currently are right now. And all that being said, they haven't faltered. They're still there. And this is
Yeah.
going to be interesting as to who gets the bye in October.
Well, yeah, and I'm a firm believer, having watched what happened with the Dodgers in Atlanta the last couple of years, that the Yankees might be better off getting the bye and hosting a first round series to stay sharp. Now they can always get upset because the Yankees can do things like that. But I think Baltimore. I'd rather have Baltimore sit around for a week and let the Yankees stay sharp and keep their pitching sharp. The Dodgers are going to wind up in the same position this year too, with really much diminished. Talk about much diminished. I mean, every team has got huge amount of injuries, and it's just who's going to be healthy and what's going to happen. Once you get to the playoffs.
Barry, I'm now an old guy. I'm 55, and I
Oh,
collected
come
baseball
on!
cards back in your day.
And give me a break.
All of my lifetime, until maybe the last 10 years, you would get a baseball card, and on the back of it, the players' stats, they'd be there. They wouldn't be missing years unless they went to war, like Ted Williams or something like that. It was pretty consistent that pitchers, hitters, guys' arms fell off. We're Steve Dalkowski here in Baltimore, right? So we've seen these things, but whatever this is from an injury standpoint, not just the pitchers, but position players as well,
Oh yeah,
this has been an unbelievable thing for when I see Jim Palmer every night, doing games here and all the starts and the complete games and the innings and all that. And they have all of this science now and all of this training and the spin rate and the launch angle. What's going on? This is a crazy time for baseball, especially for guys who are a little older than me like you.
yeah. There's like $1 billion worth of players right now on the injured list, and if you talk about the baseball cards, just two examples. I mean, Mike Trout hasn't played a full season since before the pandemic, and Fernando Tatis has never played one. He's basically either been injured, suspended for drugs, in and out of surgery. This year it was a fractured a fracture in his upper leg below his knee. Now he just came back yesterday. I mean, you can't. You're investing so much money in these people, and then suddenly, you can't keep them in the lineup. Now, I do think, and I had a discussion with this over dinner table with Joe Garagiola, Bob Nightingale, and a couple of other people the other day here at Chase Field. And one of the things I think is that, first of all, obviously you get paid all this money, and essentially, if you're going to have a little hour, you're going to sit out. You're not going to pressure yourself, and you've got guaranteed money. So whether you
And it's
play
just a regular season game. It's just July, right? Like literally, right?
right, exactly, or
It's become
even
like load management for basketball players, right?
right, pretty much, you know. And then on the other side, when you look at the problem with Tommy John surgery and fraying elbows, there is so much proprietary interest in information by each of the teams. They don't want to pull that information together to get a study put together to make sure that they can cope with this problem and maybe find an answer to it. Every team is out on its own trying to figure out a way to do it. And so consequently, you wind up putting together pitching staffs with guys who've had maybe one, if not two, Tommy John surgeries, and you know that person is going to sign them to a bunch of money, and they're going to break down again. Look at the Dodgers. I mean, Tyler Glasnow, Clayton Kershaw, Bueller's had two. You know, they're all, they've all broken down.
Well, Strasburg would have been Roger Clemens, right? I mean, should have been Roger Clemens, but it won't be.
No, and the amazing thing to me is that, Paul Skeens has made it pretty well through the season unscathed, throwing at the impact that he's throwing, and he just might be an anomaly. Although I see,
like Nolan Ryan was for 30 years.
Right. Although I see, Sturgery, I don't see how he avoids it sometime in the immediate future, but he has made it through a whole season, and he has thrown 100 miles an hour regularly. It's a, I think it's a league-wide problem that really needs to be addressed by the greatest doctors and by pooled information. And so until you do that, you're going to have this scattered approach to, what the problem is.
Well, it's also kids in Little League are having this problem, right? My wife's friend has a kid who's a 16-year-old pitcher. Blew his arm out this year. Tommy John surgery at 16. And it's almost like badge of honor when you're 16. I'll get the surgery. I'll get fixed because that's what sort of the legend is. And we certainly didn't see that with John Means here. I don't know if we're going to see that with Bradish. I mean, we have a whole, starting rotation full of guys getting Tommy John this year, not to mention Batista for the Orioles and for this race. And by the way, Barry Bloom is at Sportico these days. You can follow him out there. I'll make sure we get links and all that stuff to the website. You're a Yankees guy, lifer. The Yankees are always there. Lots of years it was the Red Sox. Lots of years it was the Rays. This Oriole thing the last couple of years with new ownership, with Masson falling apart, and really the whole business of cable television and regional sports networks. I mean, every time I put Masson on, there's either sumo wrestling, if I wake up at 1 a.m. and I fall asleep, there's harness racing, or there's highlight. And I know you miss highlight not being down in Miami as often anymore. The TV thing's over with. I don't know where the revenue's coming from. When a guy like Rubenstein and Arrighetti come in, they put their $1.8 billion down, they get rid of the Angeloses, they're going to come in, they're going to do whatever they're going to do. But we're still a small market. People aren't just forking over hundreds of thousands of dollars for club seats or sponsorships. We're not that kind of city. The revenue part of this for baseball, does Rob Manfred know what he's doing? Does anybody really know what they're doing so that they can afford to pay Adley Rutschman or Gunnar Henderson or Jackson Holliday $50 million a year 6 years from now?
I don't think that it has had anything to do with Manfred. I think you just have you have a system that is out of control. I mean, really, you look at the AL East, you got the Yankees, the Red Sox, they own their own networks. They're going to be set apart from the television problems that everybody else is having.
Well, the Blue Jays are owned by the network, right? Literally, right?
So you add the Blue Jays to that list too. So now you have the other two teams that are, but basically you have Tampa has a decent television contract and they get good numbers down there. The Orioles are a mess. Go out west where, the Dodgers have Guggenheim money. I just wrote about this today. Guggenheim money, a $7 billion cable contract, and their own network, which has been monetized for a while already. The Padres and the Diamondbacks both lost their contracts. This year, they're not getting $60 million in money from television, and they're being run by MLB, and they're through a streaming subscriber network with 20 to 40,000 viewers, and the way they're getting paid is that the sub money, which would usually go to the middleman, is now going directly to the team, but it's not going to be in any way a chance to offset that 60 million. So you have to build up.
That's really it. If the fans have to pay for it, if people have to actually pay for it, and then we're finding this out with the NFL this week with where's my Peacock and where's my, I'm just not going to watch the game. I'm not giving them money for Apple Plus to watch a Friday night baseball. I mean, the decisions that they've made in regard to, look, the original sin of you and I back in 1993, 94 and strikes, that they decided that the Yankees and Dodgers were going to have all this money. They were going to do this tax system, and then everybody bilked the tax system. And then the cable money just fell out at the beginning of the century. And Angelos got his when he got the Nationals deal and took all the money. But it just feels to me like it's like hockey, and I know you're a big hockey fan. It's like hockey. If they actually have to make this off of old school concessions, gate receipts, sponsors, sweat equity, I don't know how small market baseball teams are going to generate $200 million worth of revenue. I don't even know how that's going to be
All you have
possible.
to do is look at the disparity in revenue, and Sportico does a great job. We've got a guy, Kurt Badenhausen, who
Kurt
does
came on last month and gave me
right.
hell. He was great.
Yeah, and it basically, you look at the Orioles revenue in a year, and you look at the Dodgers revenue, or Yankees revenue in the year. There's no way they can compete. I mean, the Dodgers revenue is almost $700 million, and half of their payroll, half of that pays for their payroll, which is about 350 million. The Orioles are probably down around half of that, and there's no way they can compete in the market. There's not, unless the big deep pocket owners want to go in and spend their own money, but that doesn't work. Eventually they get tired of it and they go, "What am I doing here?" All you're doing is you're increasing your franchise value as time goes on. And contest you on the original sin. I think the original sin happened in the 1960s when Major League Baseball could have done what Pete Rozelle did with the NFL, and they basically could have bought market areas up from the 16 original teams, codified that for all expansion time. Though they could have given $1 million or $2 million for each of the markets, and they would have given up their television markets, willingly, because most owners at that time didn't even want to put their games on TV and thought it would cut into their gate receipts. So
Well,
if you
always. I mean, if the game was on TV, nobody was going to go to the game, right? The
Right,
home
so
games,
if you
right?
go Washington Senators, here's $2 million, New York Yankees even, and then it comes under the shell. It's revenue shared. No matter how it develops over the course of the years, all that money goes into the pot for Major League Baseball, and it's equally shared, kind of like what they did with MLB.com when that was developed in 2001. Now you had all the big market teams who have voted against it because they wanted to keep their own internet and their own, streaming rights, but they were voted down by 75%. And actually, MLB.com, I've had guys like Jerry Reinsdorf who voted against it at the time say they were wrong. It's been the biggest pie grab for MLB owners from top to bottom in the league's history. And they could have done the same thing with the regional sports networks. All that money could have been shared, and you wouldn't be in this situation right now. So what's coming is there's a movement among some of these small market owners that you're talking about, like your guys in Baltimore, who are looking at this and going, I can't compete. I had this conversation.
Hey, by the way, Steve Bisciotti, 20 years ago when he bought the team, he used to talk to me then before he took my press credential. I remember having a chat with him about why he didn't buy a baseball team, because he was rumored to buy the Florida Marlins at one point. Yeah, he wanted to buy a team. That's what he wanted to do. He almost bought the Minnesota Vikings at one point. And he said, I wouldn't want to own the Orioles. He's like, you can't compete. How would I would never be able to beat the
Right
Yankees? That was 20 years. That's the way any rich person would look at this. And I look at Rubenstein
now,
and these
they
guys.
are in the situation where, if they don't find a way to generate more revenue, and you interrupted me in the middle of what I was trying to tell you, that there is a movement among those small market owners to basically split the revenue evenly, but I don't think they have 75% of the vote to get that passed. There's enough teams in baseball, whether you go through San Francisco, LA, New York, Boston, Chicago now, both have their own, cable networks, regional networks. There's enough that all you need is 7 or 8 to block it. And I think there are 7, 8 who are not going to share their revenue. So this is now stuck time immemorial, and the Orioles are going to have to figure a way. How does the Orioles in Kansas City, who are having decent years this year after rebuilding from within, how, when you get to the end of the 6-year free agent period, do you actually keep your players and keep them happy, and they don't go out into the open market and get flush contracts from the big market teams.
What would you want to know about David Rubenstein if he were here? What would you ask him in regard to what he thinks this business is? And I keep thinking to myself, you bought it for $1.8 billion, you get $600 million in free money. It's, as Kurt Badenhausen said, it was a depressed asset. It was literally, like bottom of the. So he's in. They got a good team. They got good players. They're going to make the playoffs. There's going to be a little bit of that kind of revenue. They're going to fix the stadium up and have an all-star game. They think there's some revenue and all that. But I live here, and I know every baseball fan there's ever been, and they don't create new ones. We have a lacrosse problem in our marketplace as well, with kids playing that sport instead of baseball. I just wonder. He's 74 years old. This Arrighetti guy who really likes himself a lot, and he's a younger guy. I keep thinking to myself, the game here is to come in, go nose on nose, have a good time. Don't lose any money, but whatever it generates, I don't need to make a whole lot of money, because they're making 50, 60, $80 million a year if they flip it. So if they go to flip this 5 years from now, it's probably a $3.5 billion product at that point, if they can figure
Right,
out how to do it and do it the right way.
the
And
whole that's the whole issue.
that's
You
the
know,
game.
doesn't
That's
matter
their
how
game.
much how much money you lose and how much you lose on the field during or the rink or whatever during that period of time, the basketball court. Once you sell it, it's going to be at such a phenomenal, increased price from what you bought it, that it's going to be worth the time that you put into it. And if you're 74 years old and there's estate planning, I to answer your question, I would ask him, from the first blush of this, what do you think about the future? Where's your growth? Do you have like growth plans? Do you have like a 1 year, a 2 year, a 5 year, a 10 year? How do you see this happening? When you look at the finances of Major League Baseball and the finances of the market, what's your plan over time? You don't come in and do it with a scatter approach like the Miami Marlins did. And they came in. This guy bought the team from Luria. The team was, was pretty much scattered. I don't know how many times by Luria. In the end, it was like they had the outfield of Stanton, Asuna, and Yelich, and they all went to the wind. And then this new guy bought over, and Derek Jeter tried to start rebuilding it. And when it got to the point where Jeter wanted to spend some money, they jettisoned Kim, they jettisoned Jeter, and they're treading water in a ballpark where they're drawing like 3,000 people. Now, for that matter, I mean, Baltimore is a great stadium. They're drawing again. Look, the Diamondbacks, I keep answering, adding them because they went out, they spent 150 million more dollars on payroll in the offseason, even though they lost their television contract. I think the best thing for them for the short term was actually losing the contract, because they knew that the only way that they could survive was to put fans in the seats so they could buy tickets, concessions, parking. That's the only place that they're going to go to make money. And
It's
they're
probably the same
attempting
thing with the Orioles. A lot of these teams, it's like, I
and
don't know where the upside is when you don't have
well,
half
and
million dollar sponsors lining up to really get
well,
that number together, or
well,
skybox owners, or even people that want to buy 81 games. There are no
well,
season ticket people anymore.
yeah, well, they do. It's like if you make the team palatable and entertaining, and like the Diamondbacks attendance, I think is up 300,000 people this year. It's the second highest in the league, and it's because they came off the World Series and they invested, and the team is exciting and maybe better than last year, and they have a chance of making the playoffs again. And so that's where the investors come in. That's where the marketing comes in. You pay, like you have equity partners that come in and buy the team, pieces of the team. The Diamondbacks went in the reverse of that. When they were in financial trouble, they sold off $10 million shares of the club to 10 investors. And now Kendrick and those guys have been buying them all back. When they want to sell them, they buy them. They've been absorbed back into the franchise. And the franchise was an expansion franchise for 200 million in 1998, and now it's worth like a billion and a half. So it's like and Kendrick is in his 80s. So when their survivor rates or the minority partners are the rest of the majority partners take over, there's going to be, some reckoning. But that's just the way the whole cycle goes with these things. So essentially, really, where the Orioles are right now is that you have a window. You're in this window, and you better damn well win now because that window is going to shut on you pretty quick.
Also the window of geniuses, whether it's Billy Bean or whether it's Theo Epstein or who, whatever the Mike Elias thing here and the way it's turned out, especially in the Astros cheating side of things and people leaving torch bridges behind them and coming here to a job that not a lot of people wanted in the Angelos family, taking this thing over and saying, I'll have no money. I'll have lots of draft picks. We'll have maybe a little bit of money to go down to the Caribbean and put an academy in or, do those kinds of things once the old man started to falter. But Elias's role here in being the genius that propped this thing up really is kind of amazing with the draft picks that they have bared fruit so far.
Well, I mean, he comes off the Lunau tree, and Lunau and maybe Mike Rizzo are like were the best at, especially in the early days of the national franchise. They were struggling, and every year they had the number one pick and they were number two pick, and they were like, Harper, Strasburg, Zimmerman. I mean, you go down the list, Rendon. I mean, they parlayed their draft picks, and the same thing with the Astros under Lunau and Ellis. It's like Elias. They basically, Bergman, Altuve. They struggled for 5 or 6 years and amassed enough draft picks, and they had the money that they were making in the stadium. They're a medium market team. They had a big television contract problem down there, but they've been able, of all the teams you look at, I mean, the Orioles, if they go to the AFC, the ALCS again this year, I mean, it's like the eighth or ninth year in a row. It's unheard of. I don't know, maybe it's the seventh, but it's really, they've been there. They've been to the World Series, and I'm not, I had this discussion with a Dodger friend, friend of mine the other day. I'm not one of these guys. I don't think, the 2017 Astros beat the Yankees and beat the Dodgers in the playoffs in the World Series because they cheated.
They
Yeah,
absolutely cheated. Yeah, I mean, I'll
but
never look at it any other way.
they still had to win the games. They still had to hit the ball, and they went to Dodger Stadium, and Darvish lost 5-1 in Game 7, and they didn't have signs in Los Angeles, and they didn't have signs at Yankee Stadium. The Yankees were just not good enough. The Astros have beaten, and I wear the Yankee hat today because I grew up in the Bronx, and I've been going to Yankee games since 1960 with my father when my father took me. But I'm harder on them than anybody, and I'm like, the Yankees have not found a way of beating the Astros, and in all their history, there's not one team that has owned the Yankees like the Astros have owned the Yankees. It's absolutely incredible that it goes back to a wild card game in 2016 that they lost, and they can't beat them. They can't solve it, and they can't solve the problem. And the Astros, after a lousy start, they're right there again, and they're going to win and probably go to the World Series again.
For the Orioles, and their pathway and all of these injuries and what Elias has tried to do, cobbling together the bullpen, the deals, not all the deals work out. I mean, the kid from Miami, Rogers, they're going to figure him out for the next couple of years, but Eflin's been a lifesaver for them. The deal for Burns back in January when they sort of knew Bradish wasn't going to be right. Suarez, my Venezuelan brother, has come to life. I mean, the Orioles are formidable, and if they can just get Rodriguez healthy and can figure out Westberg and get him healthy, I really do feel like 4 weeks from now, they could put their best foot forward in October and be the kind of team that can pitch enough but hit a lot and hit home runs, which traditionally winning in October, you have to hit the ball. And this team has the capability of doing that. Maybe more so than some Seattle Mariners type, the soft hit teams. This is a team that once the bats get together in October, if they get hot, they can win the World Series. And you talk about Arizona and Texas, they didn't look like the World Series September or Labor Day last year. They just looked like teams.
Yeah, I mean, look, as I wrote today, I mean, it's obvious now that except for the anomalies like the Orioles and Kansas City this year, that you have to basically invest big money over the course of the regular season to win the regular season. I mean, the top six spending teams this year are all leading divisions right now, and by a lot, or they're in the playoff hunt, like the Mets, who are making a great run at it right now, and they could edge out any one of Atlanta, Padres, the Diamondbacks, depending on how the last 24 games of the season go. So, I mean, you get to the end of the season, and because of this convoluted playoff format that they figured out, any team can get into it and get hot, and then beat the teams with the high payrolls. Because, as Billy Beane once said, what he does with small payroll and analytics to win the regular season doesn't work in the postseason in the sample size of a short series. Anything can happen, and look what happened to the Dodgers the last 2 years. The Padres and Diamondbacks shut down Mookie Betts and for Freddie Freeman at the top of the lineup. They batted like a collective 200, and the Dodgers won one game in the last two NLDSs. Now this year they've got Ohtani, which is going to make a big difference. But if they go in with the pitching that they've got right now and the injuries, you think the Orioles have injuries? I mean, right now the Dodgers have nothing. I mean, they're playoff, pitching last year going in, was Kershaw, Bill Miller, and a veteran pitcher who let up 4 home runs in an inning in San Diego and Arizona when they lost that game. So it's like now Buehler's coming back. They're hoping he's going to be healthy. Kershaw is probably done for his career at this point. Glasnow's on the disabled list. Yamamoto, they spent $325 million on him. He's still on the disabled list and has been since June 15th.
Well, one day Ohtani will pitch for them, right? One day.
Next year he'll pitch for them. He will replace Kershaw next year. That Doc told me that. Dave Roberts told me that the other day, and I wrote it the other day. He's done. He is back to pitching next year. So, but for this year, they can be plucked out even when they win their 11th division in 12 years. The Yankees can be plucked out easily, whether they win the division or not. The Astros somehow seem to sustain. They win the division, sit around for 5 days, and still have no problems going into the ALDS and winning and going to the championship series, and then every other year or so go on to the World Series, win or lose. It's a complete crapshoot under this system, and certainly the Orioles, if they can win a game in the playoffs this year, which they didn't last year, it'll be incumbent on them, and they could get hot. And sure, you could wind up with them. You could wind up with the Orioles against Arizona in the playoffs, or with the Cubs could squeak through. You just don't know at this point, and it's not going to come down to the end of the season and into the first round.
Padres win the World Series. You're going to finish this book finally, Barry?
Well, not this year.
It's the 40th anniversary.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to finish it this year, but I've been lagging.
That's all right. You're allowed to lag out there in Arizona. I have to take my cheap shot at you. So you finally moved to Arizona, and the hockey team leaves you. That's the one thing with baseball. We'll move to Sacramento. We'll move to Salt Lake City. We'll do whatever we want. The hockey thing in your market is specifically what I'm speaking about. When you can't generate money, and Oakland trying not to generate money in some cases, the whole ownership thing at the bottom, because there's no relegation. These poor teams have to figure it out.
Well, look, having covered the Coyotes for every year of the 28 years seasons they were here, and through a myriad of the worst owners in hockey history. I mean, this is a team that lost $35 million at its best times every year. When the NHL owned the team to keep it here, and they asked Ken Kendrick to evaluate it and buy it, Kendrick did his due diligence on the books, and he basically said to me that if they won the Stanley Cup and sold out every game in Glendale, they'd still lose $35 million. I mean, hockey is a sport where there's no national money. So, I mean, if you don't generate local dollars, you have no shot at it whatsoever because the money coming out of the league off of television contracts and all that stuff is like nebbish, as we would say. So the
Right.
Coyotes never had a chance. They never had a chance with a good owner. They didn't have a good owner. The last guy was God's worst gift to ownership I've ever met. Worse than Donald Sterling. I've covered two prizes, and both of them are right
Come
up
on now,
there.
you've been in a room with Angelos once or twice too. So it's that. Come on now.
No, no, Angeles was a prize in comparison to Alex Morello. So I mean, it's like how they wasted the asset here and had alienated everybody in the community. So when push came to shove, nobody wanted to help them to build an arena here. It's textbook stuff.
They
So
even screwed up Wayne Gretzky. How did they do that?
because he can't manage and he can't coach and he's not a general manager, he's a great player. That's
And he's a
all.
nice guy.
And he's a nice guy.
He's a nice
But
guy.
this hockey operations that they put into place was probably the best they've had outside when the Maloney was running the team for the NHL and had them go as far as the conference finals before they lost to the Kings that year.
I remember
But,
that.
these guys are taking a great team to Utah. They with a good nucleus and oodles of salary cap space. I mean, they had like $40 million of cap space to spend. So, and they're just starting to spend it. So, I mean, they're going to be a very competitive team in Utah. And I think of ultimately we may get the Coyotes back here. If the guy who owns the Suns, Matt Ishbia, and I wrote the story about a month ago, if he, decides that he wants to build a new arena ultimately in downtown Phoenix, and within the next 5 years or so, wants to procure the Coyotes as an expansion franchise, they can start off fresh. They have whatever the cap space is, and they go from zero to the cap to build, just like Las Vegas did, Seattle did. You can build a team, a very competitive team, very quickly, and you have the market and a stable arena and a stable owner and a stable franchise, which this team never had. So Ishbia told me, he'd like to help get the team back here. Let's see what he does in the next couple of years.
Well, they'll never steal the waste management open from you out there in Phoenix. Barry Bloom is here. He is Boomski. He covers all things sports and baseball and hockey and some business of sports out from the desert. He's been covering baseball for 50 years, a long, long time. But it's still been a long time since the Yankees have won. The Orioles and the Yankees maybe playing some playoff games next month. Certainly playing a couple big games 2 weeks from now up at Yankee Stadium in the fight for the American League East. Who do you expect to win the World Series? Houston? You always seem bullish on Houston when I talk to you.
Yeah, I don't see the Dodgers doing it, don't see the Yankees doing it. It's like a process of elimination at this point. I don't see the lesser teams like Baltimore, Kansas City getting through. I think, the Diamondbacks were a one-shot thing. They're going to come in, and they're going to trip up somewhere along the way going through. Texas is not repeating. They're not going to even make the playoffs. So, it's a crapshoot. So for the process of elimination, I probably would go with the Astros.
I spent a half an hour with you, and it feels like 10 seconds. I appreciate you. You stay healthy out there. I need you around to wear my Oriole hat the day after Game 6 when the Orioles pile dive here at Camden Yards in late October, and we'll have a little bit of fun together. Love talking baseball with you. And the new ownership thing is really – I've been on the air 33 years here. It's a new thing. It's something that's certainly fresh and different, new team president. So, for all these years I've known you, there is some fresh air here in Baltimore, and not to mention the $600 million. It feels nice that I can talk baseball with lifelong baseball people with you and have some semblance of like, hey, this thing's getting better and it might still get even better, which it
Sure.
never could feel that way before. It really didn't.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you. Take that Yankee hat off when they get eliminated a couple weeks from now. Barry Bloom joining us here. You can find him out on the internet. He is Boomski. He is also out at Sportico, and his a good partner, Kurt Badenhausen, joined us last month. If you want to know anything about money and Rubenstein and Angelos and all that stuff, we did 40 minutes on franchise values. It was an awesome piece.
He's terrific.
He was fantastic. All right, we're taking a break. It's still football season here, I promise. Luke's covering the game. Luke's at Camden Yards. I'm Nestor. We're WNST, AM 1570. Towson, Baltimore. Got a little hockey in this one. I like that. Baltimore positive. Stay with us.